believe in past lives? Have you ever heard of past life regression therapy? Have you ever considered that some problems that you might have in this life have something to do with a previous life? We're going to explore these and other questions on the next Mystic Fix, and I hope you'll be a part of it.
Mystic Fix, a program for the whole being with Julia Gordon-Bramer on News Talk STL.
Welcome to Mystic Fix. I am Julia Gordon-Bramer. Today's episode is in alignment with the Hanged Man tarot card. The Hanged Man is about sacrifice and letting go and surrendering to a higher power or a purpose. When it comes to past lives or past life regression, this card suggests a willingness to let go of old patterns and beliefs no longer serving you and to surrender to the process of self-exploration with the guidance of a therapist. It's also about sacrificing desires or attachments for the sake of self-discovery. Alternatively, the Hanged Man card could represent a past life in which the individual has made a sacrifice to a higher power or authority. This can be a life in which the individual was a spiritual seeker, a martyr, or even a victim of circumstances beyond their control. The card might encourage the individual to explore this past life to gain a deeper understanding of themselves or their life path. Overall, the Hanged Man can be seen as an invitation to let go of the past and surrender to the unknown, which is a key aspect of the life regression process. To talk more about that, first, let's meet Dr. Shelley Kerr. And I am speaking with Dr. Shelley Kerr, who is the author of Past Lives in Ancient Lands and Other Worlds. It's a new book by Llewellyn. So Shelley, you are a past life expert, correct? Are you actually a regression therapist or do you just study it?
Yeah, I've been doing regressions for over 20 years now, which is dating myself a little bit.
Uh-huh. Great. Yeah. I'm familiar with, I've read Brian Weiss's book, Many Lives, Many Masters, and I've done a little bit of regression therapy myself. I had a couple experiences, which in my opinion, I've talked to people about regression therapy and sometimes they say, well, I don't know if I just made it up in my head. And I say, what does it matter, right? I mean, there's information for you there. It kind of like a dream. I think there can be a lot of value to it. But why don't you tell our viewers, first of all, what past life regression therapy is for those who don't know?
Yeah, you make a lot of good points, Julia. The regression it's kind of like I take people through a guided journey. So it would be like they were listening to a guided meditation CD, doing a relaxation, walking through a doorway and just following some prompts. And then when you're asked certain questions, then the subconscious mind begins to present material. And so, yes, if you're asked questions about where you lived in a previous life, it probably does to a certain extent feel like you've made it up. But as you've said, it can be very, very valuable, incredibly therapeutic. To me, there's no way to really prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, but as long as the person uses the information to make more sense of their current problem, because normally they're going to have an issue, and that's why they're going on the regression in the first place. So usually I'll ask people in this little guided meditation to, go back to the origin point where this issue became a challenge. So that could have been happening last week, or it could have been happening back in the 1600s or whatever. So once they're in that space, then if I say, okay, great. So what were you doing back there in the 1600s? And they'll say, well, I was doing this and this and this. Okay, great. So how does that apply to the challenge that you're having here now? And they'll go, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm doing the same things now that I was doing back then. And so if that thing they were doing feels good and we like it, then of course we want to do more of it. But if it's something we need to change, then we do different healing practices, cutting cords, doing some forgiveness or whatever it is that helps them feel better so that they can release that behavior and again, make the current situation and the current life more pleasurable and easy to deal with.
Yeah. You have another book, Meet Your Karma, The Healing Power of Past Life Memories. Are you saying that problems we have in our current present life is karma of past life?
It is one way of looking at the world. I think, a lot of us, we're just humming along, everything's going fine, and then things just suddenly aren't going well anymore. And so most of us will look to the three-dimensional world, into our environment. We might go seek medical treatment, or we might talk to a regular traditional counselor, or we might do all kinds of things. But if those things don't remedy the problem, then a lot of times I found that I'm more of a last resort, or, why not? I might as well try anything. And then what people find is sometimes that these situations really do have an origin point in a past life. Absolutely. And how I got into it was because I had a friend who passed away in an accident, and I had a lot of unresolved grief for many years. And I looked here and looked there, wasn't getting what I needed. And when I had a past life regression and realized that the two of us had known each other in many lifetimes, it was just like the energy of that heavy burden just kind of got up and left. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with this now. I can let go of this agony.
Yeah.
And so I thought
Kind of found a peace in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to know that you'll probably see that person again and in future lifetimes too.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I find in my tarot card reading work, when I'm working with clients, often how people live in one area of their life, they do it across other areas. And so if someone has, a lot of money struggles and beliefs in scarcity, it'll affect their love lives, and it'll affect even their health sometimes. And someone else might be fine with that, but they just don't believe they're lovable. I see that a lot. And so I sometimes wonder, as a spiritual person myself, if we've got, soul work, like, maybe my soul's work is to understand my own value, which as I grew up early in this life, I didn't have that. I didn't perceive that. And it's been a journey. I'm almost 60 years old now. And it's been a journey of finding it. And I can see all the choices I made along the way to validate the false belief in no value. And so I kind of wonder, have I been doing this? Have I been on the merry-go-round life after life after life? Or is there something, just unique to this life? What do you think about that? Do you think there is a pattern across lives?
I definitely believe there's a pattern, just based on all the people I've worked with. Let's say I'm taking somebody back to that origin point I mentioned before. Then let's say we're trying to find out, you and I have talked earlier about the fact that relationships and love and stuff like that is usually one of the big issues for both your practice and mine. People want to know about their love relationships. So let's say they've come because they want to know how they knew their significant other, for example. So we might end up hitting several lifetimes. And then we find in relationship, that pattern of behavior is a theme that gets carried. But those themes could also exist in the realm of soul purpose. We can get really positive information from, I know from your readings, as well as from what I do. You can start to see, oh, wait a minute, they've had the same purpose over many lives, or they've had the same relationships over many lives. So I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
And the other place that I've come to understand that I feel we are getting a lot of influence from. I wrote another book called Heal Your Ancestors to Heal Your Life. And it's based on this process I developed called genealogical regression, where instead of regressing to our past lives, people go meet with the higher selves of their parents, and then they go send light to their ancestors who are usually embroiled in battles, or they're at funerals, or something horrible is happening. So we send light to those areas, and it starts to bring a healing through the generations, because the study of epigenetics is now telling us clinically, like there's studies with the CDC proving the fact that up to 50% of our personality is actually carried through our DNA.
Oh,
and so
how interesting.
another area. I've seen clients who they're fascinated by Ireland, for example. I'm just making that up. And then they didn't know that that's where their whole family line once lived or something, I think we are very influenced by that as well.
Yeah. So I have this experience I'm going to throw at you just to get your opinion. I had a dream. I was preparing to do a clearing. A client had called me up, and at her work, they were having just terrible things happening. And everybody was getting sick with like major diseases or else in accidents, and people were getting divorced. And then things started to go particularly crazy at this work. It was in a mall, in a store, and the mirrors in the store were clouding up black, and merchandise was flying off the shelves at people. And it was quite a big deal. And I said I would go and cleanse the place. And I went to sleep the night before, and I dreamed of a Native American. Oh, I perceive him to be a shaman, because I know he was not a chief, because chiefs have the full headdress, but he had some feathers. And he was angry at me. And he said, "Who are you, white girl, to use Indian methods on Indian spirits on Indian land?" And that's all he said. And when I woke up, like, whoa. But I knew, I had an inner knowing after that, that every one of us in the store, now the store was in, it's now the defunct Chesterfield Mall, right on a river. I did my research. It certainly was Indian land, and right, the Peoria tribe was up and down the Missouri River. And we, in the late 1800s, marched them all off to Oklahoma, and who knows how many died. And so I looked up a charity, and I said, we need to make a peace offering saying we are not a part of that we have, my actual relatives were fairly new immigrants. My mother's British, so it wasn't that my ancestors brought that on, but I wanted to show that I wasn't a part of that. And certainly I realize I've benefited, everyone in America has benefited from the Indian land. And so we did this, and I did the clearing, blah, blah, blah. But the reason I'm sharing this is because I was talking to a Native American friend maybe half a year later, and I told him about this dream. And he said, "Oh, you have Native American blood." And I said, "No, I don't. I'm sure I've done the ancestry DNA. I am as white as you can imagine. I mean, at like 99 point something percent, Northern European. And there's just no way that I have a drop of Indian blood." And he said, "But you have to, because our ancestors don't speak to people outside." And I thought that was so fascinating. And the only thing I can come up with is maybe that I had a past life as a Native American, and there was some kind of bridge there. I don't know. What do you think?
Wow. As usual, you're causing me to think of all kinds of things. I love talking to you. First of all, wow, just so many thoughts. You reminded me of, I spent my childhood part of the time in Colorado Springs, and everyone in our neighborhood started having ghostly visions. And I have an autistic brother, and he was seeing a Native American who was, making noise and scaring him or something. And so, of course, that was on an Indian burial ground too. And I think you make a lot of good points about the land, and, that we just don't know exactly what's going on the land. And our family, how you have things that are always told to your family, right? And then you find out they're not true. Because I did the same thing. I went on Ancestry. We were always told we were part Cherokee. And I wrote a whole bunch of books about gem and mineral healing, because I'd been shown these things by a Native American man in this lifetime many years ago, and I started talking about them. And then when I went to my Ancestry, I didn't have any Cherokee in there either. And so it's also been something that I've thought about as well. So if you make a really interesting point, I mean, perhaps that is our past lives coming in,
Yeah. Or maybe it's just oneness.
Mistake on our ancestry. I don't know.
Yeah. So Shelley, how does one work with you? Can people do this regression therapy remotely? Do they have to see you in person?
One of the things that's been important to me in really in a lot of my books, is to put guided imagery inside the book. So the reader if they feel comfortable, can actually get an app. They could read the journeys. They could do them themselves. I also have a YouTube channel, which is Past Life Lady. You can just type that into YouTube.
I love it.
You can try some of the journeys themselves. And then I do some private sessions. I just feel really strongly, though, that I do more service to more people if I can help people to learn how to do these things for themselves to the extent that they can. And then, if it's more complicated, then yes, come see me for a session. But I encourage people to try even some of the ones that I have on YouTube yourself, just to get the flow of things and start to, because I feel like when I had my first regression, it was just very quick. I saw a very brief flash, and then over time, as I practice this, I feel like this is almost like working out at a gym. We need to exercise and keep practicing, and you get more and more information over time. So I encourage people to try to get into that realm a little bit first and see what comes up, because I think it's still a tool. We don't want to do it all the time, but it can be very revealing when it's needed.
Yeah. So I've done it 2 or 3 times, and I always felt called to do it at a certain time. It's not something I would want to do every day. It's just kind of too heavy for that. Yeah. You do blend spiritual practices with science and research. So how do you balance these two worlds?
Wow, that's a great question. Ancient Lands was a lot of fun to write because I tried to provide the reader with brief histories of the different phases of history that I was describing, and then mixing them in with things that I've heard during the regression process. I like to include historical facts in these, because one of the things I'm also trying to do is, as readers are engaging with the content, I wrote an earlier book where I coined a term I call supretrovy, which is a spontaneously induced past life memory. I feel that we engage with content, whether it's a documentary on the Discovery Channel, or whether it's a book we picked up in the library, or if you travel to a new place and it resonates with you. I feel like our souls are waking up to the places where we've lived in past lives. And so I'm trying to make the content engaging by providing a little bit of history there. And then I'm asking the reader, okay, so think back now. We've learned a little bit about all these historical places. So what places resonated with you? What felt really good? What felt really, oh my gosh, get me out of here? Because I think the places that we really love are the places that we're running from. That's where the healing could really occur, and that maybe there's some familiarity there. So then I'm inviting the reader to go on a past life journey in that book, and set their intentions. Like, I want to know how I am connected to Greece, or why I felt called to prehistory or Mesopotamia, or whatever area they're looking at. And then they can get more details out of the regression by figuring out what resonates.
Interesting. I love how you said what we love or what we're running from. That's, nobody wants to look at that shadow, what they're running from. Yeah. Fascinating. Is there a quick summary that you might give of this recent book, like what people can expect? You said there are stories in here, right?
Yes. So historically, or typically, when people go on regressions, usually they're going to regress back to earlier lifetimes. And by earlier, I might mean like 16 or 1700s, 1900s. So in this book, there are also people who go way back. So I start with prehistory, people who recounted lives as hunter-gatherers. And then we talk about some of the issues that are presenting with people who go back that far in time. It could be having to do with fear. And so there's guided imagery in there for the reader. Also, let's let go of some fear. Some fear is good. It keeps us safe. But if there's other things that we need to release, let's learn how to release those. And then we go through all the phases of history, the big ones, Egypt, of course, Greece and Rome. And then the second half of the book is a lot of fun. I'm a big believer in Lemuria and Atlantis. I've written some books for the Edgar Cayce Foundation, so I have drawn a lot of those clientele to me over the years, and I really believe in that. So I wanted to put Lemuria at the beginning of the historical timeline, but my publisher, who I love, Llewellyn, said, why don't we put that in the other world section? So, because that's a little far out for some. It can't be historically proven. So part 2, we get into Lemuria, and the idea that some people can actually regress back to before time in a place called before, that I call before the before, where they're just like one with the universe. Then we get into Atlantis, and then we get into people who really believe they either interacted with extraterrestrials, or one gentleman is floating around in a spaceship. And so there's a lot of fun things. And again, guided imagery in every chapter, so the reader can hopefully, take some fun journeys and at least hopefully be entertained, if nothing else. And then
Very
take that
cool.
big past life journey at the very end of the book.
Oh, that's so great. Well, one of our lucky viewers will get a copy of your recent book. Llewellyn is generous enough to send one out. So if they write mysticfix.com. Shelley, how can people reach you if they want to follow up in some way?
Yeah, my website is pastlifelady.com.
Okay.
And my sessions are there. I have a book link. I've got a link to my podcast and other things right there.
So
and
great.
Sessions.
It has been an absolute pleasure. I hope to continue to remain in contact with you in this life, but maybe in some others too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks a lot, Shelley. We'll talk more about past lives with author Karen Joy after these messages. You're listening to Mystic Fix on News Talk STL 1019 and 94.1.